talk about race in BC film. I'm Sabrina Rani Furminger. Hollywood was built on a foundation of white supremacy, and by extension, so was Hollywood North. We've seen this white supremacy manifest in the stereotypical and demeaning roles that BIPOC actors have played, and in the white-centered stories that have been funded and filmed. But the status quo is crumbling. In recent years, we've seen more diversity on screen and behind the camera than ever before. But are the changes happening fast enough? And what's the danger in not doing anything at all? Today, we'll speak with BIPOC actors working in the Vancouver film and television industry about their experiences navigating white supremacy in Hollywood North, as well as what they expect from their allies. Join us. Patrick Sabongui is an actor, producer, and teacher who divides his time between Vancouver, Los Angeles, Atlanta, and New York.
What connection do you see between the film, our homegrown film and television industry, and white supremacy? And in what ways has white supremacy impacted your acting career here?
Unfortunately, I see white supremacy as the foundation on which the industry is built. And the entire, not just the market, but the training for our industry and the development phases of our industry and the production phases and the economics, everything about making film and TV, even making marketable art in Vancouver, which is true for most North American cities, is built on a foundation of white supremacy. And I mean, that's the connection. What is the connection between a house and its foundation? You know, what is the connection between the renos of your house and its foundation? So it's the bedrock on which Canada was founded, on which America was founded. And so what we do, and this is the thing about white supremacy, is that it's so insidious that there's no escaping it. You ignore it, it shapes the work. And if you confront it, it's shaping the work.
Then what should be our goal with anti-racism work? When I talk about dismantling white supremacy, is it to, I mean, let's go with your house analogy. Is it to remodel the house, or is it to just tear it down and then build it back up?
It starts with the individual. It starts with, who are you? As an artist, as a writer, as a producer, as a creator of content, as a storyteller. Who are you, really?
You and I have been having conversations about representation and diversity for many years now, Patrick. It seems like from our very first conversation in 2014 to now. And I
thought we would have figured it out by now.
But I even find that the questions that I'm asking are different. The things that you're saying are slightly different. And I'm just curious about how, I mean, you talked about the individual. So let's talk about you. I know that you have encountered as an actor, like let's talk about as an actor specifically, although I know you got a hat on now, you wear many different hats, but as an actor, you have encountered microaggressions and blatant racism in the industry. How has your response to the white supremacy, to the racism in this industry changed over time? And also, how has racism changed?
Oof, these are big questions. I think, and this might be a controversial statement, but I think we've turned a consciousness corner in our culture. I think everybody knows it's not okay to be racist. Like that's not a novel idea anymore.
Mm.
I don't encounter people who are intentionally trying to whitewash my characters or my work. And therefore, my reaction to those incidents is different.
Mm.
Everyone who's working now acknowledges the diversity movement, the inclusion movement, the authentic representation movement, and they're all making efforts to the best of their abilities. And I believe that, from producers to casting directors, and it is exclusively their ignorance that allows those things to continue.
Mm.
They know that they have to do better. Everybody knows they have to do better. They don't know what better is yet.
Mm.
So I really embrace this responsibility of educating people who don't know about representation, who don't know that, well, it's thank you for casting me and making me a brown guy, but what we're not going to do is make me an angry brown guy and just put dirt on my face and say that's an awesome costume. Like, right? Mm. So there's the effort is there, and the willingness to be educated is still there. I find I still have to advocate for myself. I still have to educate them about the nuance within cultures, and caution them against lumping people of color all together and then checking boxes. So earlier on in my career, I felt like I had to educate them about the importance of representation. Mm-hmm. And then once I had overcome that, and that was usually the breaking point, right? That's when I started like turning down jobs and walking away from jobs, or having, really butting heads creatively and having confrontations, which my career would be very, very different if I hadn't come into my own, as a brown man in this industry.
Your career, and probably how you see yourself and how you live with yourself and your mental health as well, I'm assuming. I'm projecting because I'm going through something very similar right now.
Yeah. It did. And it did all change. And that's why earlier I said it starts with you and knowing who you are. I didn't know who I are before. And it was that moment that I was like, oh, wait, this is who I am now. Mm. And that seed was planted around, September 12th, 2001, right? That's when 9/11 was, right? 2001, I think. So
we're 20 years, 20 years since, yeah.
Right. So, there's that, in the Arab community, there's this inside joke about, we all went to bed white on September 11th and woke up on September 12th brown.
Yes.
Right? Like our identity changed. Yeah. And around that time, I realized, wait, the world sees me very differently. And then that seed grew into, several years later, me realizing, whoa, I am a different person. The world does see me differently, and I have a different social responsibility to my identity and who I am. Yeah. And for me, that was the moment that I realized I had to start pushing back and educating people. So to get back to your question is how has that evolved over time, is that knowing my identity and being confident in who I was and how I wanted to represent myself began with me having to educate my collaborators about representation and the importance of authentic representation. And now I find that obstacle is reduced. It's out of ignorance or innocence. They don't know. They're trying to do better, but they don't know yet. And I find when I say, you know what, I don't look like a Williams. Can we give my character a Middle Eastern name? There's no more, what? why? As soon as I say that, they're like, oh, really? Oh, that's interesting. Okay, but this happens in rural America. I'm like, yeah, we're everywhere. It's okay. Like no one's gonna like, and so it's not met with the same resistance. And I find that they are more willing to become allies. Everybody wants to be a hero. You want anything done? You want to go to the bank and get, that your funds released or whatever the problem is, you want to overcome that? Don't head into with confrontation. Go up to the teller and give them the opportunity to be a hero today and say, hey, this terrible thing has happened. Can you help me?
Can you help? Yeah.
And if you frame it that way, then I find there's much more willingness to help. So that's how my reaction has changed. I still advocate for myself.
Yeah.
I still embrace the opportunity to educate those around me and to learn from those around me. And I find that there's less resistance.
Yeah. You mentioned allies. I'd like to talk a little bit about allyship. What do you want or expect from people in this industry who describe themselves as allies?
Action. Allyship is not a noun. It's not a t-shirt you can wear. If you're an ally, you are an ally in the moments of action. It's a verb. Do stuff.
Yeah.
Speak up for me, engage in the conversation, go have the conversation with the producer on my behalf because it's awkward for me. Ask, hey, we wrote this character. They're South Asian. Is that the same? Like, ask, do the research. I'll tell you, it's not the same. I get it. The category has been expanded. It was like MENA was this new category a couple of years ago that came up, Middle Eastern, North African. I was like, oh, that's an interesting category. And then I showed up somewhere, it's like Minasa. I was like, Sa, Middle Eastern, North African, South Asian. I'm like, oh, cool. Thank you. So to the outside, yeah, right? We can all lump you all together because you kind of look the same, right?
Yeah, we look related. We look related.
Absolutely. And I dig that. And it's a visual medium, and that's cool. But if we're talking about authentic cultural representation, we don't share language. We don't really share cultures. We don't share, a lot of belief systems. So I get it. And I'm not faulting anybody for it. Like, we're trying to figure it all out, and that's cool. But an ally is somebody who is in action. They're holding a sign, they're marching alongside us, they're initiating conversations, and they're picking up the torch when we light the fire.
One of the things I would like to highlight with this series and to celebrate is anti-racism work that's being done up here in Vancouver in the industry. What are some anti-racism efforts or initiatives that you have seen up here in Vancouver that you think are effective?
Okay. I think there are a lot of initiatives, and I think there are a lot of entities that have been reallocating funds to anti-racism since before we called it anti-racism.
Yeah.
And I think like Story Hive and Telefilm and even Crazy Eights and all of these entities that have put money on the table to amplify underrepresented voices is planting seeds for actual anti-racism work. Putting underrepresented voices at the center of the story and being true allies in saying, here's some money, here's some publicity, here are some straight white male experts who are going to put their influence and their privilege to work for your story, and centering those diverse voices. I got to do this every time I say diverse, by the way, because diverse from what?
What does it mean anymore? I don't describe myself as a diverse person anymore.
No, but that word,
yeah,
it centers whiteness. It's saying, okay, if we're if we don't talk about it, then we're talking about straight, able-bodied, white dudes.
Yeah.
Anything other than that is diverse. So every time you say diverse, you're kind of propping up this, the white supremacist system.
Yeah.
So you gotta, I don't know, put asterisks. So I think in Vancouver, that is one of the most effective tools that we have, is centering underrepresented voices.
Rukiya Bernard is a filmmaker and award-winning actress based in Vancouver. Her latest film is The Blackter, and was inspired by her experiences navigating the industry as a Black woman.
What connection do you see and have you experienced between the film and television industry and white supremacy?
There's a lot. I mean, we're living in a time right now where we can actually name what it is, but I've been on this earth a long time, and the majority of that time has been in this denial of a white supremacist culture that we all live in. And literally within, I don't know, a year for sure since George Floyd, but arguably before that, maybe with the Philando Castile murder 5-6 years ago, people have been like, oh, wait a second, racism still exists. Why?
Yeah.
So in the film and TV industry, it's presented itself in so many ways, usually in microaggressive ways, where roles for people of color are not as interesting, as prominent, as well-paying as roles for our white counterparts. And, as a Black Canadian actress, that puts another layer of having to struggle to climb to the top. And because the majority of the work that we do here in Vancouver is American-based. And so they're normally going to hire American actors before they'll hire Canadian actors. But on top of that, to hire Black actors just in general, you're going to be lower on the call sheet and stuff. So it's presented itself that way, and other ways as well. But me as an actor, that's been my experience.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I don't know many actors who dreamt of, when I grow up, I want to be an actor because I want to be that sideline character in that TV show or in that movie. You're really inspired normally by the lead, right? And if you're a person of color, we've just never really seen a lot of ourselves in that position. And so it's just kind of this mind-warpy experience where that's the dream, is to be this white number one, and yet what you do see are people of color who are, supporting that number one, and then you work really hard to become an actor, and then you end up in that supporting role again, over and over and over again. And you wonder, how do we break out of this, someone had to die for people to wake up. I mean, I still have this fear, of if you speak up and out, here's the thing, Sabrina, everyone is woke now, or trying to get woke and doing the work and learning and right? But when it comes to brass tacks and in the moment, we're still operating from a place of what we were this whole time, right? At least I am. I've been doing this about 20 years, and I've dealt with all kinds of crap on set, and I just swallow it or figure out a playful way, because you never want to be disagreeable as an actor, right? That's you get blackballed in the industry. We saw it. I mean, I remember watching the Fresh Prince of Bel-Air reunion episode. Did you see that?
I did. You're going to talk about Aunt Viv the First.
Yes, Aunt Viv number one. And here's a woman who's finally, after all these years and a dead acting career now, is getting vindicated. And so what she spoke about being the angry Black woman, a very typical trope that you see on your TV, being that in real life has had real life consequences for people. Viv being a very famous example of that. Yeah. And so you kind of operate from a place where you don't want to be that. And that's in general, but especially as a Black woman, and then especially as a dark-skinned Black woman, you don't want to be disagreeable. You're looking for your next job, and everybody talks in this industry. So so the way I've dealt with it was just basically swallow it, confide in other Black people who are experiencing the same thing, and you stay the course and you focus on the joy. My whole career, I've never wanted to blame the fact that I was Black for where I was as an actor. I mean, just race aside, I had to grow as an artist too. And I'm still growing as an artist. So that needed to happen. And it's interesting because I feel like, you know, about what was it? #Oscars So White. That was about 5, 6, 7 years ago now or something.
Yeah, I think so.
That was a big shift in the industry. I think there was that was around the same time the first Diversity in Hollywood report came out, and they were just like, oh my God, we are practicing racist ways. Oh my God, we need people of color. We need people of color. And there was this whole diversity push. And so all of a sudden, I'm getting hired a little bit more, and I think that also was at a time when artistically I was more available. I grew up a little bit. I had kids, so me as a human being grew up a bit, and I found that just the regularity of work allowed me to grow confidence in my artistry. And I thought that was really interesting because if you don't, as an actor, if you are not working on set regularly, then it's really hard to build up a certain level of confidence in your artistry. And that's just across the board. But if in a systemic way, only white people are being offered that, then their artistry just gets to grow. And then on top of that, the roles get to be a little bit more interesting because they're a little bit, so it really bolsters some really beautiful performances that we've seen because there's the opportunity to practice and gain experience. Whereas as a Black actor, you got to be out the gate, hitting the bullseye to be able to hopefully get that next part and then wait for it to happen again. At least that's what it was before, right? But the industry is shifting right now.
I want to talk about gaslighting. Because one thing I've discovered through my conversations with BIPOC artists is that for years they felt that they were gaslit by colleagues, that their white colleagues would dismiss their concerns or their statements about microaggressions, specifically microaggressions, as them being too sensitive. And even now, there's that gaslighting statement of, oh, diversity is so hot right now. You're so lucky. That is very prevalent that I have heard, from white actors in this industry.
I'm lucky to be Black, or I'll be in pre-COVID. I'd be in the waiting room at an audition, and you hear a couple of white actresses also waiting. Oh, they're probably going to go F this, and you're just like, what the. Yeah.
And so what response, do you have for the gaslighters, or for people who sit in that waiting room and say that thing?
It's circumstantial, right? In the waiting room, I need to stay in my zone and get the job. So I can't even worry about that.
Yeah.
And that's on them to do the work, go on Google, buy a book if they want to, right? Seek out support. But I was just, when you were asking the question, I was thinking about this one situation. I was on set a couple years ago, so pre-COVID once again. And this is around when, who's the Hockey Night in Canada? Don Cherry, right before he got fired, right? And he said something that was really offensive. was it about immigrants or just something? I mean,
he said a lot of things that were very.
He said a lot of things over the years. He's made
Yeah.
a career out of saying those offensive things, and we were all like, "Oh, it's just done, right?" But you know, he didn't adjust his banter as the times changed, and so he said something, and I was just like, "Well, he's gonna get fired," you know. And I was on set. We were in between takes, and one of the other actors, he was like, "I don't see what the big deal is," and I was like, "Well, I think it's really offensive what he said. My parents are immigrants, you know, and for him to say this is just absolutely wrong, da, da, da." And we started getting to a back and forth. And it was interesting because no one else on set was bolstering me up. And I remember one other person was saying something like, you know, it's not just Black Lives Matter. I mean, Black lives do matter, but also all lives matter. It truly does. And I was just like, great, I got to do a scene now. Right? And then there was a child actor there with her dad, and the dad started speaking up and saying, no, it's really actually important to start speaking up against these things now. You know, yes, it's a shocking change for a lot of people, and I think he was talking about a lot of white people, but you know, we have to listen. We have to listen and really think about what kind of world are we leaving for our kids, right? And then I remember walking up the stairs and being really pissed off because now I've got to do a scene with this guy, and he's above me on the call sheet.
Yeah.
And, you know, everyone else was kind of agreeing with him or staying silent. And as I'm walking up the stairs, the child actor, who is, you know, she's obviously older than what she looks like, she was like, thank you for speaking up. I didn't feel like I could because I'm just a kid. And I thought, wow, that's why it's really important to speak up against everybody who's saying, no, all lives matter. I don't understand why there's such a big deal done, you know, should have his job and blah, blah, blah. And yeah, it's interesting. So here I'm being gaslit and I'm giving the, you know, I remember telling him, like, you know, for all my whole career, I've been told, you know, oh, you're overreacting, Rukiya. Racism doesn't exist in Canada, da, 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 right? And like my whole life, literally, right? And here we're having a young kid who sees it, but because of her youth, and understandably because of her youth, she didn't feel like she could speak up and out. And so she needed other adults to do that for her. But it had to come from the person being targeted, not from someone else. I mean, her dad did speak up, but like it was well after the fact I had gone in with this guy. Well, The Blacker is about a young Black actress who is tired of playing and auditioning for all the stereotypical parts, you know, like the baby mama, the best friend, the slave. And on one particular day, when she's en route to her Gangsta Bitch #4 audition, she gets pulled over by a cop because he says there's a break in entry, and because she looks the part, he forces her to audition for her life. And the statement I'm trying to make with that is the roles that we stereotypically put Black people in, and people of color in general, but Black people in, have real life consequences. My dad has been pulled over by a cop. He was in Toronto, like, you know, his car broke down on the highway. And so he was walking to the next exit and the police pulled up and he's thinking, oh, good, I can get some help because I'm literally walking on a highway. And they pulled him over and said that there's been a break in entry. And the suspect is a Black man. And I'm like, you know, what is that unconscious bias that Black man is just all you need to identify someone?
Yeah.
Does the person have big eyes? What complexion of Black are they? How big is their hair? Is it shorter? You know, like straight hair? Do they have, you know, any defining markers about them other than being Black?
Yeah.
And like the effects of that.
Yeah.
That means all Black people are a danger.
With your film, what is the emotional response that you would like to provoke in your audiences, or what kind of conversations, when we are back in theaters and we can all like watch a film, we're gonna watch your film, then go into the lobby after to talk about it. Like, what kind of conversations are you hoping that we're all gonna have?
Well, I'd like everyone to be thinking about the roles that they're watching on TV, and if they fit into stereotypes, or if they are actual, genuine, fully rounded characters. Why are we seeing certain characters and certain people only in certain ways? Right? Why? I mean, I think about in the LGBTQ community, oftentimes when you have lesbian characters, one of them will die before they get to consummate their love. Why does that consistently happen? Right? I hope that my film is able to strike up that conversation. And I'm taking it from the perspective of a Black female perspective, and the stereotypes that Black females have had to audition for just to be an actor. But it applies to all marginalized communities. I like, as a filmmaker these days, and a writer rather, I'm focusing a lot on just Black Canadian content. I'd like to give voice to Black Canadians. I'm so impressed with Black Americans and how loud they've been of the plight of Black Americans, and Black Canadians don't often get seen on screen at all, like as Black Canadians. And so, I don't know, that's what I want to do as a filmmaker, is give voice to people like me.
Mary Galloway is a member of the Cowichan tribes on Vancouver Island. She's an actress, filmmaker, and the creator and star of Quorencia, currently streaming on APTN Lumi.
What connection do you see between the Vancouver film and television industry and white supremacy? And in what ways has this white supremacy impacted your career?
I think that the Vancouver film scene, as an actor, if you were to tally up all of the actors who get all of the roles, there is a very heavily leaning bias towards the white actors of Vancouver. And I have no idea if that has to do with that, as white folks, they are just more privileged, are able to get more training, are able to be seen more often, or if it has to do with the powers that be that cast these roles. I think it has to do with all of those things, but it's very hard to, as an actor, break into the Vancouver film industry, because there is definitely a lot of white supremacy kind of baked into the whole system. Being a mixed person, I'm half Caucasian, half Indigenous. I've had instances in my career where people will, I feel like, tell me, or not directly, but I can read the subtext that I'm not Native enough for something. There's like a lot of ideas of what Indigenous women should look like. And there's just a very strong, I would say, expectation for Indigenous women to have long, raven black hair, be very tanned. Like in so many auditions you see where it's an Indigenous character, as a filmmaker, I've seen, like, if I'm casting an Indigenous role, so many of the actors will show up with like very statement beaded earrings or necklaces that are like so Indigenous centered, because I feel like the system has sort of trained us to be like, you gotta like prove you're Native, you gotta, like, show it as much as possible. I mean, there was a time when I was a new actor and had been advised by some people in the industry that I need to look more Native, and I started tanning and like dyeing my hair jet black, and like it just felt like
to not actually look like yourself, to look
What's
like
that?
an idea, a white centered idea of what an Indigenous person should look like.
Totally.
And what
Yeah.
does that do to you? Like, what does that do to your mental health, or even like your feelings about being in this industry?
Yeah, I mean, it definitely like creates a lot of imposter syndrome. There is definitely uh, like a fear of not fitting in either worlds. I'm not quite white enough. I'm not quite native enough. Yeah, being mixed is just very hard, and I think that finding the right community who uh, understands the complexity of that is the community I want to work with anyways, and
Yeah.
the people who don't value that are the people I don't want to work with anyways.
Yeah. Now you have done something really remarkable that not every actor does, which is to start making your own projects. Why did you begin down this path of filmmaking, and how, if at all, did your work as an actor who was dyeing her hair, who and keeping it long and tanning and being like, oh, I got to put on all my extra props today. How much of your experiences as an actor in that motivated you to become a filmmaker?
Telling my own stories, being able to cast myself is the most empowering thing an actor could ever do, because you're at the mercy of people casting you usually. But if you have the power, if you can write yourself a role that you can just be yourself and you don't have to try to fit into someone else's idea of what a native person looks like or whatever, and that to me is sort of where I started to embrace myself and not try to conform to the like the system's idea of what I should be.
What I love though is that you're not just creating work for yourself to be it, even though, Querencia, yes, you are one of the stars of that, but you're also writing roles for multitude of people, and including, other Indigenous actors as well.
I've spent so many years on sets that are very cis white male dominated. And I thought that that's just kind of the way that it is and will always be, until I started filmmaking myself and mandating that our casting crew have a more diverse group of people involved, and it was incredible the amount of people who showed up for that. Uh, Based off of, if you go to any I feel like commercial sized film set, as a person of color, you will step onto that set and probably be the only one there. But what Jesse Anthony and I sort of mandated for Querencia was that our crew as well as our cast were diverse and inclusive, sort of to the max. Like we had in pretty much every key position, and as well as the not key positions, either a BIPOC person or an LGBTQ person, because that's the story we're telling. And it just felt absolutely necessary to have it be told authentically from people in that community and to create opportunities for those people. So we had crew members who had never been given the chance to be the key before for many different departments, and they were so passionate about it though. When they heard about the story, they applied and we did interviews, and you could tell that they were passionate about the story and they wanted to be a part of it, and that they were feeling very honored to be a part of it. And I think that is sort of the way in which I hope the rest of the film industry is going, because to go on set and feel safe and feel surrounded by your people is one of the best feelings ever.
Yeah.
And we had people coming up to me at the end of the shoot being like, thank you, Mary, for this. This was the first time I've ever stepped on a set and felt safe to be myself.
Wow.
And
And you also gave people opportunities that they hadn't had before, and they delivered. They showed,
hard. Yeah.
they showed themselves that they could do it, and they showed other people that they can do it, So hopefully, like, is that part of what you wanted to do, was to kind of have this as a legacy so that they could go on and work those positions on
Yeah.
other projects?
Yeah, and now like they have an 8-part web series under their belts on their resume. And literally everyone on my crew could put my name on their resume as a reference, and I will talk them up. I'm always referring like them all to jobs. People will come to me a lot and ask, "Hey, we need an Indigenous crew member, or we need a BIPOC or LGBTQ like quota." Even like some people are like now making it like
Yeah.
kind of baked into their agreements or whatever, where they like want to create the opportunities as well, but they don't.
And why do we need to we need to do that, right? Like, in order to really level the playing field, and to, like, can you talk a little bit, like, because I get this. I remember all the discussions about affirmative action and stuff, back in the 70s and 80s, but can you talk about why those things, like hiring quotas for BIPOC people, that is important, that needs to happen now?
Yeah, it's so important, and I understand the frustration people have with feeling like then that's unfair to people who are not in that quota. But what I have to say about that is that for so long, the system has been rigged against the diverse communities. So in order for a BIPOC person to get paid equal, to be exposed enough to get even the word that this job is available, to be able to apply to it, to get the training, to have the funds to be able to get training. Like this, the odds are so stacked against BIPOC people right now at this point in history that we need to set a precedence and start creating that space and creating those opportunities for the communities that have not been given the space and opportunities for so many years, so that in the future we won't have to do quotas at all. It will all be on the same even playing field. And that will take so many years though. So for now, like having a certain amount of, we need to have this, at least this many women in the positions of power, the like BIPOC community, like all of these things, we have to set a precedence. And right now it has to be like on paper numbers. Like it sucks. It kind of sucks that we have to be checking boxes, and it feels very I don't know, like kind of vulnerable and intrusive for people to ask you, be like, okay, so tell me why you're intersectional, and please verify to us that you are in fact Indigenous or queer or people with disabilities. Like it feels gross. Like it's not something that I want us to have to do forever, but for now, so that we can bring up the community that's been pushed down for so long, we have to do that.
What do you want or expect from people who describe themselves, who consider themselves to be allies?
So really, I expect allies to educate themselves, and to speak up and speak out when they see their colleagues or family members or friends behaving in a racist way. I think that a great ally is okay in the discomfort of, calling in racism. I really don't agree with calling out. I think calling out is a like public shaming sort of thing, and I don't think that that's healthy or beneficial most of the time. But calling in and taking someone aside and having a heart to heart with them and asking them questions and asking them to consider their words or their actions a little more carefully than what they are. That's sort of my MO. I want to bridge the gap. You know, I don't want it to be like black and white, like you're over there, I'm over here. And I think when we call white supremacy out in a really shameful way, it creates more of a divide. And I think the way forward is to, I mean, for me at least, this maybe is not right for someone else. Like, I think that anger is a very useful and helpful and sometimes necessary emotion to have, but I try not to hold anger. I'd rather hold compassion for people, and it doesn't cost me as much as it would a 100% Indigenous person to call in someone who's behaving in a white supremacist type of way. It doesn't cost me as much to have that conversation because I am half white, and I have half of my family has lived a very privileged white life, and I grew up in a very white town, and so I grew up pretty white privileged. There was, of course, racism that I faced in a pretty non-direct way as a kid, for sure, and lots of shame and all that. And I'm not trying to take away from that, but you know, I've experienced both worlds pretty heavily, and so for me to call someone in, I can take that on most of the time. It gets to be a lot though, so like, you know, self-care is so important, but for me, I would way rather have those conversations with people to try and like help them grow and help them learn, as opposed to just canceling and like blocking, deleting, and totally just dismissing, you know?
Yeah.
Thank you for joining us for Real Talk About Race in BC Film. Today's program was made possible with a grant from Human Rights Internet. Next time, we'll speak with people who work behind the camera about the ways in which white supremacy impacts what we see on screen, as well as what they're doing to level the playing field. Until then, keep talking and keep listening.